Imagine your mother looking you in the eyes and telling you she's marrying the man you thought you'd spend your life with, and smiling as she says it. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with someone who needs to hear this. I'm 27 years old. I work as a graphic designer. I spend most of my time at home, working on freelance projects for small businesses and local brands. It's quiet work, but I like it that way. I like staying in control, being creative, and having my space. But 2 years ago, my life turned upside down. I was in a long-term relationship that ended in a way I never saw coming. He cheated, lied, and disappeared like I meant nothing. After that, I had no energy left. I couldn't afford my own place anymore, and I didn't want to talk to anyone. So I moved back in with my mother. She raised me by herself. Just the two of us, always. We were close. She had a sharp mouth and strong opinions, but she protected me. She used to tell me she gave up everything, that I was her whole world. I believed her. Living with her again wasn't easy, but I tried to focus on rebuilding. I stayed busy with my work, kept to myself, and told myself I'd try dating again when I was ready. And then one day I met someone. He was different, calm, mature. He didn't play games or talk in circles. He listened. He remembered small things. He made me feel seen. I wasn't looking for love, but it felt good to be wanted, gently, honestly. We met at a friend's small gathering. He was quiet too. We talked the whole evening. After a few months, I introduced him to my mom. I was nervous, not because I thought anything would go wrong, but because I cared what she thought. She liked him immediately, maybe too much. She laughed at his jokes, made his favorite meals, started dressing a little differently when he was around. But I didn't want to seem jealous or insecure. I told myself she was just being friendly. Then we decided he'd move in temporarily. It made sense. We were saving for our own place, and rent was high. My mom agreed. She said she was happy for us. She said she wanted me to have love again. But what I didn't know was that letting him into our home was the biggest mistake I'd ever made. They were already hiding something, and I was too blind to see it. He moved in at the end of September. We said it would only be for 3 months, just long enough to save for a deposit on a place of our own. My mom agreed without hesitation. She even smiled and said, "Young love deserves a chance." I remember thinking how lucky I was, not just to have him, but to have a mother who supported us. The first few weeks felt easy, comfortable. We all had dinner together most nights. She asked him questions about his job, his childhood, his dreams. I liked that she was interested. It made me feel proud, like I'd found someone she could respect. She even joked once, "He's better than the last one." We all laughed, but slowly things began to shift. It started with little things. She'd walk into the living room while we were watching a movie and sit between us on the couch. Not once, almost every night. She'd add comments to our conversations, interrupt our jokes, and sometimes just sit there, quietly staring at the screen while I tried to pretend it wasn't weird. When I brought it up to him, he just shrugged. "She's probably just lonely," he said. "She's used to it being just the two of you." I tried to believe that. I told myself I was overthinking everything. After all, she had been alone for years. Maybe this was her way of feeling included. Then came the food. She started cooking for him every day, elaborate meals, special breakfast. On days when I was busy working, she'd bring him plates like she was running a restaurant. One morning, I came into the kitchen and saw her making pancakes, his favorite. She never made pancakes for me. They were laughing about something I didn't hear. When they saw me, they both got quiet. I didn't say anything. She also began dressing differently. Not overly obvious, but it was there. A little more makeup, tighter clothes, perfume she hadn't worn in years. At first, I thought maybe she was dating someone, and that thought actually made me happy. I asked her one day casually, "Is there someone new?" She smiled and said, "Not yet. But I'm feeling young again." The word stuck in my head for days. I started noticing how often he complimented her cooking, how he listened to her stories, how he smiled at her little sarcastic jokes. I caught him once watching her as she walked down the hall. Not for long, just a second too long. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. It had taken me so long to open up again, to trust someone. I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. I blamed my past, my anxiety, the old wounds I thought were healing. I kept reminding myself, he loves me. She's my mother. They would never do anything to hurt me. But even when I tried to ignore it, something inside me had already started to shift. A quiet, creeping sense that I didn't belong in my own home anymore. Something changed. It wasn't sudden, like a light switch. It was slow, like water dripping through cracks. One day, I realized I hadn't laughed with him in weeks. I hadn't felt close to him in even longer. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped noticing the small thing. I'd walk into a room, and he'd barely look up from his phone. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say he was tired. "Long day," he'd mutter every time. We started sleeping on opposite sides of the bed. He didn't reach for my hand anymore. He didn't talk late into the night like he used to. I told myself it was just a phase that couples go through ups and downs, but it didn't feel like a phase. It felt like the beginning of the end. One evening, while we were having dinner, just the two of us finally, he looked up from his plate and said, "Your mom's a strong woman. You know that?" I froze. I said nothing at first. Then I asked, "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "She's been through a lot. She gets it. She gets me." His eyes didn't even meet mine. He said it like it was some casual fact, like we were talking about the weather. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But my stomach hurt. My chest felt tight. I didn't feel like I was being insecure. I felt like I was being ignored, replaced. A few days later, he said he had to work late. I didn't question it. But that same night, while cleaning the living room, I found a crumpled receipt tucked between the couch cushions. It was from a restaurant, not a fast food place, but a sit-down dinner spot. 2 meals. 1 bottle of wine. The timestamp? The night he said he was working. I held the receipt in my hand for a long time. My face was hot. My ears were ringing. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't open. When I confronted him, I didn't yell. I just showed him the receipt and asked calmly, "Who were you with?" He didn't even blink. "Are you serious?" he said. "You're doing this again?" "Doing what?" "This." Accusing. Distrusting. "You don't trust anyone. That's your issue. Not mine." I stood there, silent. He took the receipt from my hand, crumpled it again, and tossed it in the trash like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I wanted to ask him again, to make him answer. But I didn't. I didn't have the strength. Something about the way he looked at me, cold, annoyed, like I was a problem to deal with, told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't mine anymore, and I didn't know who he was becoming. The house didn't feel like home anymore. I'd walk through the door after a long day and feel like a stranger. He barely looked at me. My mother was always cheerful, almost too cheerful, offering him tea, asking about his day, making little jokes that didn't include me. I'd sit there at the table, silent, watching the two of them laugh while I felt invisible. I started eating dinner in my room. I told them I had work to finish, but the truth was I couldn't stand the sound of their voices together. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel normal. Something between them had changed, or maybe it had always been there, and I just hadn't seen it. Every time I asked myself if I was overthinking it, something small would happen that pushed me further away. A glance they shared. A laugh that ended the moment I walked into the room. Her perfume lingering in the hallway long after she'd passed. The same scent I used to borrow when I had dates in high school. It was all small, quiet, unspoken, but I felt it, like a cold draft under a locked door. Then came the night everything broke. I wasn't supposed to come home early. I'd been working at a cafe all afternoon and planned to stay until closing. But I felt sick, headache, nausea, and packed up around 6. The sky was turning gray as I drove home, and a strange heaviness settled in my chest. The house was too quiet when I opened the door. No sound from the TV. No movement in the kitchen. I dropped my keys softly on the table and started up the stairs. That's when I heard it, laughter. Not just laughter, his laugh, and hers. It came from behind her bedroom door. At first, I stood frozen, my hand halfway on the railing. I told myself maybe they were watching a movie. Maybe they were talking about something funny. Maybe I was being crazy again. Then I heard my name. It was faint but clear. My name, spoken by my mother, followed by a short silence. Then a softer voice. His voice. Then more silence. Not a sound after that. I walked to the door. I didn't say anything. I just stood there listening. I could hear the soft creak of movement. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I raised my hand and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Nothing. The silence behind the door was louder than any scream. That was the moment. Not when they laughed, not when they said my name, but when they didn't answer. That was when I knew. And I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, staring at the wood grain of the door, wondering how the two people I loved most had managed to become strangers in the same house. The next morning, the house was too quiet. No TV, no footsteps, no usual kitchen sound. I came down the stairs slowly, still unsure of what to say, or if I'd even say anything at all. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that I had misunderstood, that something, anything, would make it all make sense. But when I turned the corner into the kitchen, my mother was already there, sitting at the table like she had been waiting. Her hands were wrapped around her coffee mug, perfectly still. She was dressed neatly, her makeup done, her lips painted in a soft shade of pink I hadn't seen her wear in years. She looked calm, composed. Too calm. She looked up at me and smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone when you know you've hurt them. It was soft. Satisfied. Almost proud. "Sit down," she said gently. I didn't move. She motioned toward the chair across from her. "Please." I stayed standing, my arms folded across my chest without realizing it. My whole body felt stiff, like it knew something my brain hadn't accepted yet. She took a sip from her cup and set it down carefully. Then she looked me right in the eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm in love. With him." For a second, I didn't breathe. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. The words didn't make sense, not in her mouth. Not in our kitchen. Not from the woman who raised me. She didn't stop. "We didn't plan for it," she said, as if that changed anything. "It just happened. We were both lonely. We connected. You can't stop something like that." I opened my mouth, but no words came. It was like trying to speak underwater. "Before I could find a single sound," she added, "and we're getting married." I thought maybe I'd misheard her. "Married?" She said it so easily, like she was telling me she'd bought new curtains or signed up for a cooking class. She smiled again, wider this time. It wasn't cruel, not on the surface. But there was something behind it, something hard, something triumphant, like she'd won. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she didn't feel guilty. She didn't look ashamed. She looked satisfied, like she believed this was her turn. Like I'd had my chance and lost it, and now it was her time to take what she wanted. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. He walked into the room without even glancing at me. His eyes went straight to her. Not a word. Not a look. He walked to the coffee machine, poured a cup, leaned against the counter like everything was normal. I stared at him, waiting, hoping for something, a flinch, a crack, some sign he still saw me standing there. Nothing. He didn't even look my way. I felt something inside me shift. Not snap. Not explode. Just shift. Like something deep in the center of me moved and wouldn't move back. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked out of the kitchen. And they didn't follow. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the blank wall, still in the same clothes, still hearing her voice like it was echoing off the inside of my skull. "I'm in love. With him. We're getting married." The words kept circling around in my head, slow and heavy, like weights I couldn't put down. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt hollow, like something had been scooped out from inside me and thrown away. By morning, I was still sitting there. I packed slowly. Not everything, just the things I could grab without thinking. A few shirts, a hoodie, my laptop, a charger. I left most of my things behind. I didn't want to touch anything that reminded me of this place. Of them. I walked downstairs. No one was in the kitchen. No voices. No footsteps. I moved like a ghost. I didn't leave a note. I didn't check if anyone saw me. I just opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me. That was the last time I walked out of that house. I stayed in my car for the next few days. Not because I didn't have options. I had friends, co-workers, but because I couldn't explain what had happened. I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. And I wasn't ready for that. So I parked in a grocery store lot, a library lot, a hotel lot, somewhere different each night. I wrapped myself in a jacket, curled up in the back seat, and stared at the ceiling through the window. I didn't eat much. I barely drank anything. Time started to lose its shape. On the fourth morning, I drove past the gas station near our old neighborhood. There, behind the building, sitting next to the dumpster, were 3 black garbage bags, torn, ripped open at the top. I knew before I even stepped out of the car. My childhood photo albums were in one of the bags, torn at the spine, pages curling. My baby blanket, the one she used to say she'd never throw away, was stuffed into another. My sketchbooks, the ones I'd filled with drawings since I was 11, were water-damaged and bent. I stood there for a long time, staring at the mess. The wind picked up, blowing receipts and wrappers down the alley. I didn't move. She hadn't even bothered to call. Not one message. Not a single word. They hadn't just moved on. They'd erased me. Something inside me turned hard. It wasn't grief anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was fire, slow, steady, and starting to rise. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I wasn't going to ask them why. They had shown me exactly who they were, and I wasn't going to let them forget what they'd done. I don't know what made me think of the box. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was my mind searching for something solid to hold on to, something that hadn't already been turned to dust. She used to keep it under her bed. A small metal chest, dusty and dented, with an old luggage tag tied to the handle. I saw it once as a teenager when I was cleaning her room. I reached for it, out of curiosity, and she snapped, grabbed it from my hands like I'd touched something sacred. "Don't ever go through my private things," she'd said. Her voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. I remember how fast her mood changed, how she slammed it into the back of her closet and shut the door without looking at. Back then, I thought maybe it held love letters, or old journals. Something personal but harmless. But now? I wasn't sure anything about her was harmless. They were both gone the following Saturday. I checked his location history. He still hadn't turned off the shared tracking app on his phone. A careless mistake. They were out of town. Probably a weekend trip. A celebration, maybe. I drove back to the house and parked down the block. My hands didn't shake. My steps didn't falter. I didn't feel like I was breaking into anything. I felt like I was walking into a crime scene that no one had bothered to investigate. The spare key was still hidden behind the loose brick on the porch. Some things never change. The house smelled the same, coffee and lavender and something faintly floral, but it felt different, emptier, like it had finally stopped pretending. I went straight to her bedroom. The box wasn't in the closet anymore. It was under the bed again, pushed far back behind a storage bin. I pulled it out slowly, careful not to make noise even though I knew no one was listening. The lock was broken. She'd used a scarf to tie it shut. Inside were papers. Letters. A stack of black and white photos. A small hospital band with a faded name. A sealed envelope labeled, "Do not open." And at the very bottom, a pregnancy test. Yellowed with time. Dated with a piece of tape. March 1997. I was born in 1998. The letters were from her mother, my grandmother, and from someone else I didn't recognize. They talked about the boy, about the decision, about how she wasn't ready to be a mother yet. There was one line that kept repeating across different letters. You'll always wonder where he ended up. I sat on the floor with the pieces of her life spread out in front of me, trying to breathe around the truth that was rising in my throat like smoke. He wasn't just someone she met. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was her son, the child she gave up. And that made him my half-brother. I felt the blood drain from my face. My body felt too small to hold everything that truth came with. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at that test, that name, that date, waiting for the world to start making sense again. But it didn't. It only got darker. I didn't want to believe it. Every part of me hoped there was still some mistake, some explanation that made it all less monstrous. But the box hadn't lied. The photos, the letters, that faded pregnancy test with the date written in her handwriting. It all pointed in one direction, and I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. There was only one person left who might tell me the truth. My mother had a sister. They hadn't spoken in years. All I knew was they had fallen out when I was young, and she'd never explained why. I found her through a friend who worked in admin at the DMV. I gave him a name and a rough idea of where she'd last lived. A week later, I had an address and a phone number. She lived in a small town about 2 hours away. I didn't call. I just drove. I told myself I wouldn't even knock on the door unless I was sure. But as soon as I parked outside the house and saw her coming down the steps with a bag of trash, I knew it was her. She looked like my mother, only older, with eyes that had seen more and said less. She didn't recognize me at first. But when I said my name, her mouth dropped open slightly. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with something heavier. "You look just like her," she said. I asked if we could talk. She nodded and led me inside. The house was quiet, clean, nothing like the mess I carried with me. We sat at her kitchen table, the same kind of table where, days ago, my mother had smiled while telling me she was marrying my boyfriend. I told her everything, not all at once. I stumbled through it, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to fall apart. I didn't tell her what I suspected. I told her what I knew. Then I asked, "Did my mother have a child before me?" Her eyes closed, her lips tightened, and then she nodded. She was 18. He was born early. It was a boy. I asked, "Did she give him up?" Another nod. I didn't even need to say his name. She already knew where the story was going. She'd known maybe the moment I showed up on her porch. "She found him last year," she said. "She told me, but I didn't think she meant to." She trailed off, too horrified to finish. I asked, "Did she tell him who he was?" Her answer was the one I feared the most. She said she did, and that he didn't care. I left her house with my hands shaking and my stomach turning to stone. The drive back blurred past in flashes of road signs and broken thoughts. I pulled over twice to throw up. The taste of bile and disbelief wouldn't leave my mouth. He knew. He knew and stayed. He kissed me, slept next to me, smiled at me, knowing. She said it didn't matter, he told me when I finally confronted him. Love is love. There were no words to answer that with, only silence. And something colder than hate blooming in my chest. I didn't go to the police. What would I say? What could they do? No. I wasn't going to stop this with handcuffs. I had something worse in mind. I didn't want revenge that looked like a tantrum. I didn't want to yell, break things, or post it all online. That would have felt satisfying for a moment and hollow forever. I wanted something that would last. Something they couldn't silence or smile their way through. Something with weight. So I wrote a letter. Just one. It took me days to finish it. I rewrote it a dozen times. Not because I didn't know what to say. I knew exactly what needed to be said. But because I wanted every single word to land like a nail in wood. Clean. Precise. Permanent. It wasn't angry. I made sure of that. I kept my tone calm, steady, factual. The truth didn't need rage to make it powerful. I started with the facts. My mother's full name. her son's date of birth, the adoption, the years she kept him a secret, the moment she brought him back into her life, not as a son, but as a partner. Then I added the timeline. When I met him, when he moved in, when she began to blur the line, when she told me they were getting married. I included copies of the photos I'd found, a scan of the pregnancy test with her handwriting on, a list of the people who could confirm the adoption, including her own sister. I wrote all of this carefully and clearly. Then I mailed it. One copy went to her church, the place where she had spent every Sunday, shaking hands, praying out loud, smiling in front of people who thought she was a pillar of the community. One went to her book club, the women she drank wine with, the ones she confided in, the ones who thought she was simply unlucky in love. One went to my grandfather, her aging father who believed his daughter could do no wrong, who had no idea he had a lost grandson, and certainly no idea that she had invited him into her bed. And one, maybe the most important of all, I sent to the state's marriage license office, with documentation. I didn't include threats. I didn't ask for anything. I just gave them the truth, in black and white. 2 weeks before the wedding date, everything stopped. There were no more photos of cake tasting, no more Instagram hints about the big day, no more posts from her friends celebrating her second chance at love. She vanished. No note, no explanation. One neighbor said she saw her pack a suitcase into the back of a taxi in the middle of the night. Another said the locks on the house were changed. Someone else claimed she left town entirely, sold the house, disconnected her phone. And him? Gone. No forwarding address. No digital trail. His social media accounts deleted, like he never existed. But I know he did. They both did. And now, so does everyone else. I didn't burn them down. I didn't need to. I handed them the match and walked away. I used what little savings I had left to buy a small house at the edge of a quiet street. It's nothing special, but it's mine. I painted the walls in soft colors, filled the shelves with books, and kept the windows open to let in the breeze. There's no noise here except the wind and the occasional knock of branches against the siding. I live alone now, and for the first time in years, I sleep through the night. There are no late whispers behind doors. No shifting eyes. No cold silences at the dinner table. Some days, memories creep in, not of love, but of warnings I ignored. The way I used to doubt myself. The moments I gave too much, trusted too hard, looked away too often. But I no longer carry shame for what they did. They lied. They crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. And when it all came crashing down, I didn't set fire to anything. I just told the truth. They destroyed me. But I buried them both, not with rage, but with facts, with clarity. And now I live in the silence they once filled. And I'm finally okay with that. Do you think I was right to expose them the way I did? Or should I have just walked away and let it go? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out.